Hello and welcome to the RestoreLiberty.us podcast. I'm George, and our special guest today is Cory Bowman. Cory, hello.
Thanks for having me.
We're sitting here in the King's Arms coffee shop on the West End with the owner and candidate for Cincinnati City Mayor. How in the world that happened, we'll get into a little bit. It's been a whirlwind. You said you've been in politics, 5 weeks so far?
Yeah, a little bit over a month now. So
you're a veteran. What the heck?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how did you come to be living in Cincinnati and have a coffee shop? Give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I'm originally from the area. Grew up around Preble County and Butler County. We were always downtown for Reds games or Bengals games or any other type of game that we could get our hands on. And then there was a couple years or several years where we were in the Tampa Bay area. That's where I met my wife. But I originally graduated from Miami of Ohio. And then in 2020 is when we finally settled, us and our family, back downtown. And so we started living off 4th Street. We started our church in the West End here. And then 2 years later, we started a coffee shop. And then 2 years later, we made this crazy decision.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what is it that your experiences caused you to say, hey, I think I can make a difference?
Well, I think the Bible says that people perish without a vision. And a lot of times people just jump on board to certain things, but you always have to have that purpose, that vision on the inside of you. And that can be a compass that leads to all these other decisions. And for us, it's always been to impact the downtown area and to impact the city of Cincinnati through helping people through our church. Whenever we started 4 years ago, we've always made a point to help people, whether it be with grocery assistance, whether it be with community outreaches, whatever we can do, impact them through the Word of God. And then 2 years later, as we started the coffee shop, we started this coffee shop in the middle of an area that doesn't see a lot of foot traffic, but we believe in this community and we wanted to start it where nobody else would start at first.
Okay.
And so we have a long history of just being other places that, nobody is willing to go. And so as we started the coffee shop, we've seen great benefits to this community through that. And so that's what's really driven it. And so whenever we made the decision to run for mayor, it's all based on that core thing that's been on the inside of us, is to impact the city in whatever ways that we can.
Very interesting. So you've been driven to think about things in terms of what's happening in the urban core, what's happening on the West End. Mm-hmm. I've lived on the outskirts and in the suburbs since I was a little kid. So our view of Cincinnati was similar to yours. That's where you went to see the Big Red Machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And watch the Bengals lose for 2 straight decades. Mm-hmm. But so you have a relative that's in the business. Is that something that's influenced you as far as trying to get into politics, or is that just an adjunct?
I would say that was a key factor in the final decision, because being downtown with our church and coffee shop, it was always a question in the back of my head of, is government going to be a way that we can impact the city? And then whenever I saw my brother, he's the vice president of the United States right now. His name's JD Vance.
Got a fairly decent job.
Yeah. And so whenever I saw him get sworn in as the vice president, there was no him pushing me into this necessarily, but it was more so just witnessing him being sworn in and seeing the impact that he was able to make. And it was just kind of a solidifying factor to me that, in our hometown of Cincinnati, this isn't a stepping stone to me. Cincinnati is my home. This is where we raise our family. This is what we see as what we've settled down in. And whenever I saw the impact that was being made, that was kind of a solidifying factor to me that, if nobody else is going to do it, I'll put my head in the race.
Well, and we appreciate that you did. If you talk about having an influence and using it as a stepping stone, you're talking about our current mayor. I mean, clearly the guy's a ladder climber, and he's just looking at this as the next step to become, representative or some other thing. Meanwhile, Cincinnati suffers because nothing's really happening here to move it forward. We're spending $100,000 on murals in front of the city hall, and everything else is just sort of falling apart. The recent thing with the train, selling the train, that we're going to fix all the potholes. Well, on my way here, you could lose a front tire in some of these potholes. So it's crazy. So it's great to see someone who's in it for all of the right reasons. Since getting into it, what's your first impressions of 5 weeks in the political world?
Well, I think what you just said was key, is that your perspective of how you see the city, of where the finances are going, what the potholes are like, what the city's like, that's resonates with a lot of people. And that is how a lot of people feel in the downtown area. You know, I had the privilege of meeting Mayor Aftab for the first time actually last night, shook his hand. He said, congratulations on the race. And I felt like it was like that Cinderella man type of thing, to where the fighters meet in the restaurant for the first time. But he's a very kind man, you know, and what I tell people is that I know that the blows will probably start in the race, and a lot of people are going to say a lot of different things. But first and foremost, you know, I respect him as a husband, as a father, as a man that I would like to think got into the realm to help people. I just feel like the last 4 years, I've witnessed things in my realm of business and in church and in the community to where I feel like there's policies that can be better implemented in this city. And that's why I'm running, is because I truly believe that there are certain things that we need to prioritize in this city that haven't been prioritized.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You've spent the time early in your campaign. I remember talking to you at the initial signature gathering event that you had here. And at that time, it was just a matter of, hey, we got the sprint to get on the ballot. Apparently, the naysayers were saying he'll never make it. I remember seeing a few X posts to that effect. You got to admit, it's good when you succeed sometimes, where everybody's sitting there hoping you fail. But
yeah, I've got a saying, you always keep the receipts.
Yep.
Always keep the receipts. And it's not saying that you necessarily want to just start off being against people, but sometimes the biggest factor in your motivation can be people telling you you can't do something. And the sayings that we're hearing about this campaign and about what people expect the city to do in the next 8 months, that sometimes is the biggest driving force to me, of saying, no, sometimes you got to prove people wrong.
Excellent. I hope you do. Yeah. The key is to do it for the right reasons. And you're in it to try and make things better for the people of the city. And I think the fact that you felt it necessary to take the time to write down your 7 pillars of policy, and you can get it at the website, CoryBowman.com. We'll have it on a link at the
Just
bottom.
remind people, it's Cory without an E. So my favorite player growing up was Cory Dillon. And I always, you know, asked my mom, why didn't you spell my name like Cory Dillon with an E? But no, I was born in the 80s when you had Corey Hart and Corey Feldman, all those. You didn't spell it with an E back then.
CoryBowman.
That's right.
Like I said, we'll have the link. The key, though, was you didn't want to get in front of people until you had that written down. Mm-hmm. So number one on your list is responsible money management. I think in the days of, $38 trillion worth of U.S. debt, we're hearing people like California's asking to borrow trillions, well, actually billions of dollars there. City of Cincinnati's been struggling for quite a while. They have the highest tax rates. They have an income tax. The property taxes are crazy.
Yeah.
What is it you see responsible money management can accomplish?
I think that overall, when you hear issues like what you just talked about with the railway, or even the streetcar that was implemented into the city, or all the murals or anything like that, I don't think it's necessarily that people just hate seeing murals or hate seeing this. It's just that you see that there's a lack of priorities that are happening in the budget. A lot of times people are wondering whether we need to build an arena or whether we need to do this or that. And these are all topics that are important. But if you don't have a solid foundation of knowing where the money is being prioritized, I don't really feel like you have the right to make those decisions unless you know, first and foremost, where your money is right now.
Well, and then you mentioned the streetcar. So why is it such an important thing to have a streetcar that goes nowhere, takes up parking, which is by far the biggest problem in the city, is finding a place to park. So it's like they worked against everything the city needed just because they wanted a shiny new electric thing that goes
I'll tell
nowhere.
you this too. I think the majority of people, whenever they think about the streetcar, I'm not necessarily thinking that they hate the streetcar. It's that they hate the fact that the money that went into that could have gone into other things like the pension or other things like, well, by the way, if you're hearing any of the coffee sounds in the background, that is our coffee shop, and we are doing great work here caffeinating
and
people.
It tastes great, too. I love the lattes. So the money management's a big thing, especially with Doge right now and the problems we're seeing at the federal level. But like you say, I think Cincinnati could benefit a lot from someone who looks at it as wants versus needs, or nice to have versus gotta have.
Yeah, and anybody that's actually run finances properly, you kind of have to see it as there's no perfect budget. There's no perfect way of doing things when it comes to money, but your biggest thing that has to drive your budget is the priorities. If you have proper priorities set in place for your budget, and then you have proper principles that you need to have in place to have a balanced budget and not to continue on taking on more and more debt.
Right.
Well, then all of a sudden you start realizing that you move forward in a more positive way.
So the second thing you have is another key need in the city is practical housing. How do you see that housing? And in this area of town, I think you see it quite vividly that there's, the yuppies are moving in and pushing out the people that have lived there. What is it you see as a priority for housing?
I think what it says, it's a practical housing approach. And I think what you're seeing where I'm from in the West End right here is you're seeing a disparity between government subsidized housing for people that are suffering in poverty versus high income people. And there's no in between. And so the housing approach that you're seeing right here is that I believe the numbers in the West End was over 80% is government subsidized housing.
Wow.
And so when you see it that way, that's not even legal in my mind. You need to be able to have a diverse way of doing things as well. But when you have the approach to housing that the current system has, really what you're doing is you're holding people in bondage and in poverty for all of eternity. That's kind of what's happening. There's no way out. When you have a diverse population, when you have a diverse price range, when it comes to housing, you can have people of high income, low income, and you can have people that are wanting to work in the city, wanting to raise their families, wanting to just start out in the city. If you have proper market rate housing when it comes to that as well, and a big part of this is allowing developers to build that housing and not just zoning it for whatever you see fit. We're not meant to be dictators when it comes to businesses and developers in the city. There's many. I think one of the greatest assets to Cincinnati is our local developers. I'm not talking about big time developers that just get a big hefty contract with the city. I'm talking about local developers that can flip one or two properties at a time, really honor the historical aspects of the beautiful properties that we have in our city, but also you're putting in market rate apartments or townhomes or houses, whatever it might be.
So a mix as opposed to just favoring one or the other.
And if you do that, then not only are you considering people that are less fortunate, but also you're giving them a pathway to be able to say in their community, they can raise up the standards.
Well, and I'm sure you're familiar with connected communities, the latest crazy thing they got going on downtown where they're saying you don't need parking because nobody's going to own a car, which I've never seen happen except in some liberal utopia of some sort. Yeah. And they're changing the rules to allow you to put higher density and all of the craziness there. Whereas, my idea is you shouldn't be able to reach out your window and open your neighbors. Is connected community something you're willing to take on as an issue?
Well, the way I see it, because whenever I first started running, everybody kept talking about connected communities. And so I just wanted to be educated about and kind of see what it was going on. So then I went to a town hall meeting in the Hyde Park area where it was in the general vicinity where they were discussing this. And as I was sitting there, I realized that it doesn't matter what anybody's saying in the community. It doesn't matter what their opinions are. This policy is going to go forward whether they like it or not. And I don't think that that's a good approach to have when it comes to local government. I think that you actually need to respect what people's opinions are. And when I looked at the details of the policies of connected communities, I realized that it's the biggest Trojan horse to put in these policies that have failed in the West End, right? Have failed everywhere else, but they're doing it just to have their vision of the city come to pass.
It seems like there's such a narrow point of view that they don't even look at what most people would consider common sense. Mm-hmm. So I again, it's coming through that your first approach is to learn before you speak, and that's
a novel idea.
Yeah, just crazy, right? Mm-hmm. The next one on your list is a key one for Restore Liberty. We've been talking about this for decades now. Lower regulations, lower taxes. How do you think you can attack that? Because there is such a spending problem, so we have to attack it together. But what is your thoughts on going after, reducing the budget and reducing the taxes that are required to support it.
Yeah, it's like when you have the priorities for proper money management in place, then you stop being reliant on other people's money and your citizens' money. I believe that there's so many resources and so many ways that we can develop revenue in our city to where you don't have to break the backs of its residents in order to do it. In my area, specifically in College Hill, there's multiple individuals. That one specifically lives across the street from me. He lives in the house that his mother and father built. All right. And when you talk about people that are on fixed incomes, they're in this place where they don't have these payments. They've got everything lined up to be able to live out their life the way that they need to for the rest of their days. And then all of a sudden you get an extra $500 a month bill,
right,
because of higher property taxes. Well, that doesn't work in these communities. People are literally going to lose the houses that their parents built. And so it doesn't work. And that shouldn't be the case with our residents. People should be able to benefit from the resources of our city, not just simply say, oh, well, I got to feel guilty for living in this city.
Yeah, the city of Cincinnati's got this weird kind of paranoia. We've got two professional sports teams. We've got the river right here. We've got a casino downtown. Yet we seem to always be struggling with how do we make money off of that, or how do we attract people here for that?
Yeah.
It's almost like the problems are PR as much as they are practical problems. And I think having someone in city government that's looking at the bigger picture and looking at how to attract as opposed to how to drive away.
Yeah,
I think that's huge.
From day one, you got to get up on the podium and say Cincinnati is officially open for business. We want to bring in the businesses, but also we want the local businesses to thrive here. Can't tell you how many people that are losing local businesses in the city because of the policies in place, because of their property, because of zoning, because of all this. But no, these businesses need to thrive. They don't need to be accepting handouts from local government, but also they can't be taking away all of their resources that allow their businesses to thrive. And so you got to find that balance, but then also just to be able to say, hey, we want to encourage business growth for all individuals and for all backgrounds. There are amazing businesses that could thrive in our city that, unfortunately, if it keeps on going the way it does, will never step foot in our city because of whether, like you said, the PR, whether the mentality of we're not wanting to welcome those people or wanting to welcome those businesses in that area.
Right. We talked about a couple of times now about infrastructure. We got the potholes. We've got the fact that you can't drive around downtown because that damn streetcar gets in your way all the time. What is your vision for improving the infrastructure? Is it as simple as doing what you said you're going to do? Meaning, hey, we've got the railroad and that's going to fix the streets, but then they've never done anything.
Yeah, but here's the thing though, like the powers that be, hold these funds in place and they say that we're going to invest to create more opportunity, right? Well, obviously, if you get $1.6 billion, you've got to hold it somewhere. You can't just put that under the mattress. You can't just put that in a local account.
Bury it in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. So I get it. You have to put it somewhere. But the investments that they're putting it in have maybe a 1% yield that's happened over the last year. But here's the thing you've got to realize is that the value of the resources that it's going to take due to inflation, everything to fix the infrastructure has gone up. And so in essence, you're losing half of the value of the money over the year because you're not seeing a return on investment over 1%, but then the appreciation of the resources it's going to take to fix these roads, it's going up and up and up. And so if you spent years convincing people to sell this railroad so that you could fix the roads, in my mind, day one, start fixing the damn road.
You should have had a plan. You had plenty of time.
Exactly. And if anything this winter has shown is that money has not been used properly.
Yeah, I think I used the example. Seton and Elder High School had to cancel school when the snow hit because the city wouldn't plow the streets around them.
Well, our city, people couldn't come, or not our city, our business here, people couldn't come to our coffee shop for a week because of the snow.
Wow.
No, and so we've got a local business right here. We got a local community right here. Thank God for our regulars that walk through the snow to get here. But for a week, people couldn't drive up to our establishment here because of the roads.
That's just inexcusable. The other thing that goes hand in hand with going downtown, I mean, my first thought is I don't go downtown at night because of safety. How do we improve that opinion that, we went through the defund the police movement here and the management of Cincinnati kind of bought into that nonsense. How do we improve safety downtown?
Well, in my mind, safety is not going to be improved by establishing community programs like 311. It's not going to be established by...
What is 311? I'm sorry, I don't know that one.
Okay, so 311 is a system that's been in place in the city to where they're utilizing city workers to respond to non-emergency calls. But this is the thing, is that this is...
It's like calling an Uber instead of a cop.
Exactly. And so the thing is that this is heavily disagreed with in the police department because these people do not have the proper training to deal with situations that might need that police training. They're not able to carry weapons. They don't have any of the knowledge when it comes to that. And so you're putting these workers at risk, but they're doing it because, hey, we want to increase the community's persona of these calls. If you just back the police department in the proper way, and then the culture that is set forth from the government is saying we back the police department, so much more so than just a military aspect, but as a community aspect, the term is to protect and serve. And so the police department has to have the full backing of the city officials in order to do that. The morale needs to be encouraged improved amongst the police officers. And so when you do that, and then also you say that when you are arresting people for crimes, and then all of a sudden they're getting released very quickly by these judges that do not take into account any of these laws. Well, then all of a sudden the morale of these police officers is discouraged as well, because then they're sitting there saying, why would we arrest somebody if they're just going to be re-released on the streets by these judges?
Right.
And so the system has to support the law and order, not backtrack on it.
Well, and that's always been the situation. The riots from way back when here, if they had just day one said, we back the police, we're going to do an investigation, but we trust the police. They didn't do that. They basically projected that we never trust police. And I think that's hung around forever downtown, that this attitude is we always trust the people the police are brought in to address, as opposed to, backing the cops. Again, it's the same kind of approach in that you've got to support the systems that are there instead of trying to change it to some... I had no idea what 311 is. It sounds just crazy now that you say it out loud. That
they've we're going to a lot of downtown areas to where it's like a community, program that responds to non-emergencies. But then you have one person that reports a non-emergency, but they're doing it to lure in an employee like that and then to harm them. And it's not right.
That's just unheard of. Along a similar vein, the next one was protection for children. When you say protection, are you talking about in the school systems? Are you talking about walking the streets?
Well, I think that something's resonating with our country right now when you see politicians that have children, that support the family, that support the communities in that aspect. I have a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and one on the way. And they are just as part of my life as anything. And if I'm going on these calls, or if I'm going on these appointments, or if I'm going on these events, I'm not trying to bring my kids along because it's a photo op. I'm bringing them along because I support them and I want them a part of my life. I want them to see dad at work, right? And a lot of times, whenever you encourage that mentality, that's a driving force in knowing we have to protect that generation. We have to protect them, like what we just talked about with safety on the streets, but also there are rising numbers of child sex trafficking, domestic abuse. All of these things are happening in our city. And I'm telling you, a lot of people are asking me, well, how are you going to reach this community or that community? You tell them that we have the full backing of protecting our next generation. That's going to resonate with single moms in this city. That's going to resonate with many families in this city, to where we say, hey, you don't touch our children. There is no domestic violence abuse. There is no child sex trafficking. There is nothing that is allowed in our city, and we will back that up 100% from a legal standpoint.
Again, do what you say what you do.
Yeah.
The last thing you had there was facilitating growth. We talked about it a little bit, getting rid of some of the regulations, the zoning. In some ways, I think the fact that there's such an enormous amount of taxes downtown that people just don't want to start a business in here.
Yeah.
How do you facilitate getting small business and enlarging the large businesses? I mean, P&G's still downtown.
Yeah.
Chiquita moved out, but how do we attract more of the big guys while not stomping on the little guys?
Well, a lot of times, so in the church world, There's a lot of people that are put outside the doors and they have these signs that say welcome home, right? And you're just encouraging this welcome mentality that if you are new here, it doesn't matter what your background is, we welcome you with open arms. I think that we need to have that same mentality when it comes to businesses and people that want to start businesses in our city. Welcome home. The city is open for business. We want to do everything we can to help you, not suck you dry because you're in our city.
Right.
And I think that's a mentality that has to change, is that the businesses coming to our city, the businesses that are starting from local people, we need to do everything we can to support them and not suck them dry through taxes and regulation and make them feel guilty for having a business in this city.
Or even worse, make them feel guilty for actually succeeding once they do it.
Yeah. Once you start, you think that it's tough whenever you're just starting out. Imagine if you start succeeding, then, oh my gosh, that's when the troubles hit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just back up to the 10,000 foot level a little bit. There's a lot of, I'm sure you're hearing that you can't get elected as a conservative in the city limits right now. What's your approach to going after that? And then we'll talk about what's happening on the good side. So start with the bad. What do you see as the major headwinds?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that's been made by the opposite political party in the years past is assuming that people feel a certain way. Just assuming that people are going to vote a certain way. You don't assume anything. That's why I'm in this race, is because, hey, at the end of the day, you want to vote for the other guy. That's great. But at least I can walk away from this race knowing that we gave people a choice. I have a wife at home that it was not an arranged marriage, or she was not the last woman on earth. Out of the choices that I had, I saw her and I said, my God, that's the one I want to spend the rest of my life with. And by the grace of God, she said yes to me. And so I was like, thank you, Jesus, and she had a choice. I had a choice, and our marriage is able to be successful because we recognize every day we're making the choice to be with each other. So in the same way, hey, at the end of the day, you want to vote for the other guy, at least you're walking away knowing that you had a choice. And that's what I want to give people. And I think that's going to surprise people as our message gets out, as our heart for the city gets out. I think it's going to surprise people how much that resonates with the residents of this city.
I hope so. So on the plus side, we're seeing a lot of things happening at the macro level. You're seeing, just mentioning children, you're seeing our big leaders, JD, Trump, Musk, Vivek in his latest rallies. The kids are always in the background.
Yeah.
It's now acceptable to be a family person.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have what's going on with Doge and the fact that, hey, we are finding all of these excessive spending. We're doing something about that. And the whole wave of confidence in doing things that are considered American traditions. I think that's all going to work in your favor as far as people are starting to wake up to, hey, maybe Cincinnati isn't totally gone. Maybe the country isn't totally lost. Maybe this is our last chance to make a difference. And I think a lot of what you're talking about plays right into that, growing American dream. You're certainly an example of that. JD, certainly an example of that. You're seeing these people that had nothing and have become something because of hard work, dedication, morality, doing the right thing, and putting in the time.
Yeah.
I think all that could work in your favor. Yeah. So this is a unique time. We're going to have to get out like crazy for you, and you're going to have to get the word out. But I think if people see where you're coming from, hopefully the podcast helps.
Yeah.
We need to get something in there in the city structure that gives us a chance to succeed and take advantage of all these resources that the city of Cincinnati has. One of the things you mentioned is when you were, we initially met was the idea that you were wanting to get at least a couple of Republicans to run for city council. How's that going? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that what I told the leadership whenever we first started is that a key aspect of this campaign, hey, if I've got to be the first one to get in, and by the grace of God, we got in with our 500 signatures, but this has to start a community involvement of saying, hey, we need to have some better choices on city council. We need to have some better choices in these critical roles in our local government. And as we move forward in that, the deadlines for those signatures are, I believe, in August or September. For that, we've got some time to do that, but put in the right people for that. It's not my choice to choose who those people are, but hopefully this will stir up people enough to know, hey, if that guy can make a difference, then I believe I can too. And knowledgeable people that actually know the details of the legislative process, what differences they can make versus what differences they can't make.
Well, and we are seeing success with the idea that we want people who have signed the front of a check. In other words, if you've had to make that decision about how am I going to make my business profitable, how am I going to pay my employees, how am I going to retain my employees, I think that's what we need in government now, as opposed to the people that have never had a real job their entire lives, much less try to run a company. Yeah. So you run a church, you've run a business. I think that's a great background for making a difference in government, is knowing that you've made a difference in the private sector as well. So as we leave, what's your final comments? What do you want people to know that maybe we haven't hit on yet?
I would just have people say that, look up our website, corybowman.com, look up our social media. I'm going to be as transparent as I can be on all these platforms. My job isn't, for you to vote for me right now. My job is to convince you that I'm the right guy to vote for in the next few weeks and months ahead. And so our first thing is a primary. To our knowledge, we have a primary at May 6th, and our early voting starts April 8th.
Wow, so we're not that far away.
No. So I believe that if you are in the realm of voting, you're registered to vote. And if you aren't registered, get registered. But if you feel like you would like me to be on the ballot, at least in November, then please do everything you can to participate in this primary election. Go to the Board of Elections. Early voting starts April 8th. Goes all the way to May 6th. Get out there and vote for us. Cory Bowman as the ticket. And then we'll take the next steps after that to be able to ensure that we're getting the rest of the city on board.
Excellent. If you go to his website, he's got several meet and greets coming up. He's going to be at our meeting at the farm on the March 26th.
Yep.
And hopefully you'll be at our rally on April 13th, where we talk about fiscal responsibility and some fiscal sanity in government.
Yeah.
Cory, thank you very much. I hope to see you make a difference in a big way. Thank you very much. If you want to know more, you can go to restoreliberty.us or give us a call, send us a text at 513-400-5832. Thank you and have a great day.